If you're having girl problems, I feel bad for you, son. I got 99 problems, but a bitch ain't one.
3, 2, 1.
Excuse me. Pretty Mr. Gizmo, huh, kids?
I forgot about that. That's why I do these things, to tickle myself. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Chilling with Sasquatch, which is probably going to get rebranded real soon. Tonight we're going to finish those Sabertooth cat sightings we were reading, talking, and discussing about, and then we're going to talk about, wait, what order is? I think it's Ed Gein is next. And then I'm going to explain how the Empire was right and they were correct to take over the galaxy. That without them, the technological advancements of it, we'll get into all that. That's neither here nor there, nor peach pod square. So, all right. So I need a one in chat if you want to start from the beginning on this whole Sabertooth cat sightings thing, or if y'all were here for the last episode, we can just pick up where we left off. Stickman Outdoor Adventures, Papa Sticky. What's up, brother? We got DN, right? You know, we got ATL Transparency News saying it's NAM. It does have a certain flavor to it, don't it? I mean, I love this intro. This whole thing here just blows my mind.
3, 2, 1.
Quite literally, I really dig that trash. Like, that sort of accidentally happened. Like, just driving. But once I heard it, I was like, yeah, that's the one, yo. But basically, I'm just checking to see if anything on that catches a copyright while we're live. For all I know, we've already been deuced off of the tubes of you. What's up, Country Boy Archaeology? I'm assuming y'all are still seeing and hearing me. Are we starting from the beginning, or are we picking up where we left off? I don't know. I'm going to pick up where we left off. Screw the pooch.
The Hagel or Hagel. In the book Mysterious Creatures, A Guide to Cryptozoology by Eberhard George M. According to an anthropologist, Jean-Francois Vincent, the Hagel is said to be larger than a lion, but like a lion, it has a mane. The tail, however, is much shorter, and of course, it has very long fangs, which apparently make it difficult for the animal to open its mouth. Due to this, the Hagel is said to only tackle small prey and to eat very slowly. It has very few offspring and apparently lives in layers in the mountains near Temki. Now, multiple people told Vincent that they had seen the Hagel. They said, quote, We are scared when we meet him because of his great size, and yet he is less
Hello,
dangerous than a
Janica. Welcome
lion
in, girl.
because of the time he takes to open his mouth, which is an interesting piece of information. It takes a long time to open its mouth. In the 19th century, paleontologists like Richard Owen and Edward Drinker Cope suggested that Smilodon used those big teeth to cut through the tough and often armored hides of giant sloths and huge armadillos. However, it seems that saber teeth on Smilodon were somewhat fragile. Specimens of Smilodon from
Most specimens of Smilodon we find, specifically Smilodon, have damaged teeth to some extent or another. How much of that damage was done in life versus post-mortem, so to speak, is sort of a debatable point, but I don't know about the whole line about how long it takes to open its mouth. That is a weird phrase, even taking into account of like a translation issue. Maybe how wide it opened its mouth, not long. I don't know.
from the La Brea asphalt and other sites bear broken fangs. Paleontologists like Julie Meechin and Juje Jack Sheng have suggested that due to the fragility of the teeth, it may have come down to those thick Smilodon arms to pin its prey when it ambushed, and then it would use the teeth to either rip the throat or make a piercing, killing bite, severing the cardioid artery. Now, we don't know for sure which of these methods it used, assuming it was one of them, but it would be different from our modern-day big cats who engage a throttling bite to clamp down on the throat of large prey to crush the windpipe. Now, going back to the Hejab,
To be clear, you kind of got to be a little bit more specific because there are many different species of saber-toothed cat-like animals. This is apparently a fairly common shape for cat-like animals to take because the Smilodon from North America was not related to cats per se. They were more closely related to like bear-type animals. They were plantigrade carnivores. We're probably more omnivorous than cats, although we have no evidence of that. What's up, Cammed Up Caveman? Long time no see, bud. Good to see you. Smoking Auditor? All both of you showing up at the same time. Making me feel all special. Tick Man? Who's the Tick Man? 7 to 8 inches long. Like I said, it depends on what species of quote-unquote scimitar-toothed cats we're talking about here, because the Smilodon had like 9 to 10 inches, whereas the South African, whatever the hell it was, Megalotherius or whatever, it had like a 5 to 6 inch. But all of that's big, real big. I mean, it's crazy. What other carnivores? Oh, what do you mean? Like at the same time, we're in North America. You're talking like dire wolves, regular wolves. You're talking, I don't know if you consider it a carnivore, but I bet it was a fearsome sight, a giant ground sloth, and probably normal ground sloths, come to think of it, which probably wasn't a non-fearsome thing to say. That's one of my suggestions for Dogman, is that people are seeing lone relatives of the sloth. That's because I'm nuts.
well, I don't know if this exactly accounts for a slower bite per se, but if it exists and is similar to other saber-tooths from the past, it would have to be a lot more methodical with its bite. Perhaps that means it would have to be slower? However, wouldn't that also mean it would need to rely on ambushing its prey and having the ability to pin them down with incredible strength? Two things that I would imagine would make this predatory animal pretty terrifying. Returning again to Mr. Hwebelman's The Still Unknown Felines of Africa, he speculates that these mountain tigers had taken to the montane habitat again to avoid competition with big cats. That said, there are other accounts of saber-toothed cats in other areas of Chad and the CAR, such as the lower wetlands. There are reports of animals sometimes described as being more aggressive that live in swamps and wetlands that also have saber teeth. There are a variety of different names for those water cats, given to them by the different tribes. Sometimes they're called the Maru Ngo, the water leopard, the Dilali, water lion, the Zeti Ngu, water panther. They all seem to be feline. Again, returning to the book Mystery Cats of the World, there's an interview from 1934 in which a creature, somewhat larger than a lion, with a coat similar to that of a leopard, emerged
I'm not capable of controlling what you think about yourself, dude. I'm sorry.
from the Kukokoro River, close to a soldier in a canoe. The creature seized the man and dragged him into the water. Certainly an odd
Greetings from
creature.
Georgia, my
Many
brother.
large cats are swimmers, but these animals seem to spend a lot of time in and even under the water. A search was launched for the Moru Ngu by the Belgian cryptozoologist Eric Joy and his hunting guide, Willie Bloom, in the early 90s. Thankfully,
All right, so several years ago, I read a book, and the name of the author and book escapes me. But it was about a 300-page treatise on the idea of saber-toothed cats in all of their facets were not predators in the classic sense, but more of large mammalian vultures. They didn't hunt down and kill healthy prey. They specifically preyed on sick, wounded, injured, poisoned, or otherwise envenomed prey. But for the life of me, I can't remember none of the details from that book.
an article written on cryptozoologia.eu gives us an account of what they found. Now, unfortunately, they didn't witness any of these animals themselves, but they did collect
Every morning I greet the sun with my butthole. Have no fear.
interesting testimonies. The first they collected from a 50-year-old man named Dennis, who had been a diamond prospector and had claimed to see one of these water panthers. Dennis had a sighting in the early 1960s. Only the creature's head and shoulders emerged from the river, and it looked from left to right, as if searching for something. Dennis never saw the footprints of the creature, but told them the creature usually hunted in pairs. Joy also got a lead about an old fisherman called Gaspard, who apparently had a sighting. It took Joy and Bloom 3 days to find his camp, and when they interviewed him, he said no, that he had never seen a water panther. But Joy wrote that he was, quote, obviously lying, which I don't know how you can be certain of that. But Joy reasoned that Gaspard didn't want.
Well, I love you too, bud. And I hope that carries you a long way, knowing that I have a well-tanned rectum. Damn near killed him.
Want to tell the truth to foreigners he didn't know. Maybe that was the case. I don't know how they can be certain he was lying, though. They were more successful when they got a testimony from an African guide named Marcel. Marcel had his sighting in the 1980s.
All right, yo. Never, ever, ever trust an African man named Marcel. It will not end well. It just won't. First of all, that's not his name. And he didn't inherit a prince's fortune.
While fishing, the creature sprinted at him from behind, scaring Marcel, understandably so, before jumping into the water. He said it was the size of a cheetah. Marcel also said there are usually 2 of them, and one waits in the water, and then the other goes behind the prey to chase it into the water to the one that's in wait. Though in the case of this sighting, Marcel seemed to think there was only one. Joy showed him an image of a royal cheetah, but Marcel said the water panther was a different animal. And then the 2 men had another lead, a native hunter who had a strange skin. Joy had to return home to Belgium, but Bloom stayed on and was able to get a photo of the skin. Examining the photo, Joy identified it as belonging to the African golden cat. So, could the golden cat be our water panther? Well, Joy seems to think it's a good possibility. Now, I probably should mention there's a variety of different explanations for what the creature could be. The Moro-ngo is sort of an all-encompassing word. Sometimes it can translate to be an otter-like insectivore. But Joy claims that this doesn't really match up with the accounts. The golden cat, on the other hand, is a little closer to the description. It even has large prominent canines. Not only that, but Mr. Hwebelman actually had a similar idea. And in a letter he sent to Joy, and this letter was sent to Joy before they had seen the picture of the skin, he theorized that, quote, nevertheless, think of the golden cat, of which we know nothing, as it is discreet, but it is large for a cat, not to mention the non-retractable claws and the webbed toes on the hind legs. Now, Chad and Carr aren't the only places where we have sightings of living saber-tooths. It seems that Senegal has some too, or at least it
Hey,
did.
Claiborne
The
County,
naturalist
how you doing, bud? That's some nice lake area you got up yonder. That's real pretty.
Owen Burnham spent most of his youth there, and the peculiar thing is that hunters in the Casamance area, which is in South Senegal, say that there used to be a large species of cat that they called the Wanjilanko. It was described as being striped, having very large teeth, and was so formidable it could kill lions, though it is said to be extinct now.
I'll tell you one thing I would be more inclined to believe than a relic population of saber-tooth would be an unknown species of lynx type animal, something like a bobcat or something along those lines that just got missed some kind of how. I might could buy that.
Does seem big cats have struggled in Senegal. The area may have had thousands of lions in the 18th century. There are now only estimated to be about 20, and even the few that are left are often killed when they ventured out of the national park and attack livestock. And the Casamance area in southern Senegal seems particularly at risk. According to the CIA World Factbook, pressing problems exist with diminishing wildlife populations, which are threatened by poaching, deforestation,
Together, eight strong.
overgrazing, soil erosion, desertification, and overfishing. Tree cover in Casamance is severely threatened by illegal logging too. So, if there was a
I'll have to go looking directly into the devil cat, but my understanding of it was a real big black cat in areas where black cats aren't known that well. Oversized eyes, possibly enlarged canines. I read an account of it once. I didn't really. It was like one of those, yeah, right, probably a bobcat. Meh.
Species of saber-tooth there in the last few hundred years, it's easy to see how it may have become extinct. So, could saber-tooth tigers have survived in some regions on the African continent? Well, here's the interesting thing. It's not just Africa. When you start looking for reports of living saber-tooth cats, you start to get accounts from around the world. If we jump across the Atlantic, we have reports of the tigre dentero, or tapir-eating tiger, and the cloud forests of Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. This animal is around the size of a jaguar, sometimes a little smaller, with brown fur, a short tail, and of course, large fangs. Reported sightings go back to at least the 60s. There was a man named Peter Matheson, who was an American novelist, naturalist, wilderness writer, and former CIA agent. He authored many books on wildlife and wild cats, including books on snow leopards and on tigers. In one of his books titled Cloud Forest, a chronicle of the South American wilderness, he writes about an interesting conversation he had with a French-Canadian man.
All right. I got a clouded leopard story, as strange as that sounds. On one of our courting dates, me and wife Squatch went to the museum with a couple other friends of ours. And we went to the cat exhibit, and we walked into the cat exhibit, and standing in front of this enclosure was a whole group of kids and middle-aged to old ladies and stuff. What's up, New York Outcast? Good to see you, bud. And we were all standing there staring at the cage, and I read the little thing, and it said there was a clouded leopard in there, and I looked around at everything, and there was no cat in this cage. And then I saw an ear twitch, and suddenly there was a cat right there. He was right there. And if his ear had not twitched, had a fly not landed on him, I would have never noticed him. What's up, Mexican Longhair? Good to see you, bud. Came in to show some support. We like that support type stuff. Hey, let me show you the best way to support. I got a thing for that. Where is it at? Oh, yeah. Drunken thoughts or to support, think happy thoughts. I find your lack of happy thoughts disturbing. Yep.
Named Piquet in Belém, Brazil. Belém is sometimes referred to as the gateway to the Amazon. Now, Piquet had already been on the continent for 3 years and was traveling alone and on foot. He carried everything he had with him, the clothes on his back, a jackknife, a safety razor with a sawed-off handle that fit into a small wood matchbox, a waterproof packet containing his passport, billfold, and a set of worn maps on which he traced his journeys through South America. Piquet was certainly a character. When Matheson met him, he was weak with recurrent malaria and broke. Now, as interesting as Piquet was, let's skip ahead a bit to the part that interests us, where the two men discussed dangerous animals. Apparently, Piquet thought most animals weren't particularly dangerous
Izzy.
unless provoked.
Welcome to the show, girl. Keeper of the list. Good to see you. Welcome in. It's good to see everybody. We can all just get along here, right? Right.
Though he did describe a, quote, rare striped cat, not quite so large as a jaguar and very timid, which possessed of two very large, protruding teeth. This animal, he said, occurs in the mountain jungles of Colombia and Ecuador, and he glimpsed it once himself. So what did naturalist Peter Matheson make of this? Well, he wrote, let's suppose I exulted that the saber-toothed tiger, like the cougar, had long ago established itself here in a smaller subspecies, and thus survived the Ice Age extinction of its North American ancestor. What are the llama, vicuna, and the guanaco, after all, but living descendants of cameloid animals, which became extinct on the northern continent? For one wild moment, propped up by my own zoological jargon, I teetered on the brink of a great discovery. I believe Piquet was sincere in his account, however, mistaken. Now, in the 1970s, apparently a large felid weighing 160 pounds, so about 73 kilos, was shot in Paraguay, and this was around 1975. The cat was referred to as a mutant jaguar. However, supposedly, a zoologist named Juan Acavar examined the corpse and discovered the animal had fangs that were 12 inches long, or 30 centimeters. And apparently, this biologist suggested that the creature...
Oh, woofy. You think Ed Gein was right? No, you got that all wrong. It's the Empire that's supposed to be right, but you're not far off the mark. I mean, that man had a human lampshade.
may have been a Smilodon. According to the story, though, the authorities went with the mutant jaguar explanation as to not alarm the locals. Now, I am referring to this as a story, as there doesn't seem to be much, if any, evidence that this ever happened. Carl Schuker has tried to find evidence surrounding the event, but, quote, sadly, all my attempts to trace Juan Acavar, the whereabouts of the specimen itself, and any corroborating information to ascertain whether this incident really did happen in the first place have so far met with failure. Now, if you're like me, you're probably craving some physical evidence at this point. So what have we got? Well, in 2014, 2 skulls from the Peruvian Amazon were examined by Darren Naish and Peter Hawking. The skulls didn't have the protruding saber teeth, but there is speculation that only the males of the species have the big canines or something. However, the skulls did differ in other ways, one being far narrower than a jaguar skull, and the other much more robust. So, what did the studies reveal? Well, in the paper, Mystery Big Cats and the Peruvian Amazon Morphometrics Solve a Cryptozoological Mystery, it states, we took 36 cranial and 13 mandibular measurements and added them to a database incorporating nearly 300 specimens of over 30 felid species. Linear discriminant analysis resolved both specimens as part of Panthera onca, which is the scientific name for a jaguar, with high probabilities for cranial and mandibular datasets. Furthermore, the specimens exhibit characteristics typical of jaguars. I should note, however, that in his book, Mr. Schuker points out there is no absolute confirmation that these 2 skulls actually did originate from a speckled tiger and a striped tiger. We're going to move away from South America for a moment and look instead at China.
Flied lice.
Specifically the Shennong-Grao Forestry District and the Huping Mountains, where they have accounts of saber-toothed cats. This is also the area where accounts of the Yeren come from. I wonder if they're friends. The creature is named Guo Xinhuang.
You know, I've heard tell of the Yeren, long-haired beast from the mountains. It puts the lotion on its skin, else it gets the hose again.
A creature bigger than a tiger with yellow stripes and long, downward curved canine teeth. Similar to the Tigre Dontero, some of the first recorded reports of the Guo Xinhuang seem to come from the 1960s. Another parallel is that there are reports of some being shot and killed, but the remains were either lost or destroyed. It's theorized as being a subspecies of Siberian tiger, with an odd adaptation, I guess, or even Dinofelis cristata, though Dinofelis cristata was more leopard-sized than tiger-sized. And finally, even the United States and Mexico have had sightings. Specifically northern Mexico up to Arizona and New Mexico. In 1913, a museum curator named Joe Taylor stated that 2 saber-toothed cats were shot by U.S. cavalrymen in Arizona. There's also a pretty wild story from 1929 of a Bronco businessman, Colonel R.B. Pearson, who apparently drove around with a saber-toothed cat caged up in the back of his truck. The creature was described as being 800 pounds, looks like a combination of a tiger, lion, and cougar, growls like all of them together, has claws like a cat,
Blue unicorn
stripes
is
like a
mountain
tiger,
fresh.
a square snout,
What's up,
shaggy
man? Good to
hair,
see you.
and tusks in its mouth. Pearson claimed that he fed it a calf
Cat, good
every
to see
couple
you.
of days. So where did he get this creature? Well, he claimed that he and 6 other men captured it southwest of Mexico City in 1928, and that the animal had already killed several people. He planned to take the creature to be identified in DC by the National Zoological Society, but his truck apparently overturned in Iowa and the animal escaped, at which
And then we had that whole story sequence of the circus from Red Dead Redemption 2, where they had a dog pretending to be a lion. And they also had a lion.
point Pearson claimed his pet resembled
Did anybody here play Red Dead? Anybody? Anybody at all? I've got a joke for Red Dead players, but it's only for Red Dead players. Everybody else is going to have to go hide or something.
a gorilla and was not dangerous.
What?
Many people think this story was a hoax. We have more accounts though. In 1946, a man named Jerry Padilla claimed to have a deceased relative who had seen a saber-toothed cat on a remote mountain road in northern New Mexico during the night. More recently, in 1994, there was a report of a saber-toothed
UK
cat
Medic?
from
Good to
northern
see you, bud.
Mexico from a Mr. Roberto Gutierrez. Seems far-fetched to think of a large saber-toothed cat hanging around in the US, but we do know on rare occasions that jaguars have traveled to New Mexico and Arizona. A male was photographed in the Dos Cabezas Mountains on January 6, 2021. Now here's the thing. I think it's good to be skeptical, and I think there isn't much, if any, hard evidence to go on. But a little part of me is open to the possibility of some of these cats existing today because, well, for one, to put it bluntly, cats are sneaky as heck. Now, thousands of species are discovered every year, but when it comes to animals,
As an observation, we have no idea how sneaky saber-toothed cats were. Any of them. They were all extinct before we kind of made the spotlight.
the new discoveries are generally pretty small creatures. There are some exceptions like the Saula in 1992, and that's reasonably big. But usually if you go through the lists, you get things like small
Hello, Tales
fish,
Told in the
frogs,
Dark. Welcome in,
arachnids,
darling.
insects, etc. But if there are any large creatures that can remain undiscovered, it's got to be cats, right? Cats are champions at remaining undetected. In 2017, sand kittens were photographed for the first time in their wild African range. The Iriomote cat was thought to not be a real species, despite sightings, until it was proven to exist in the 1960s. Pretty impressive considering the island it lives on, Iriomote, is only 290 square kilometers or 112 square miles. I myself even went to the island to look for the cat a couple of years ago. I drove up and down a section of road that was a hot spot for sightings, and I walked through different forests and around the coast and other hot spots.
All right. I got to give you credit on one thing. When it comes to trying to find unknown cats, going out there as a piece of bait yourself is not the best way to bring back evidence. I'm just saying.
Where there had been a lot of sightings, and I didn't see any cat or any sign of it, despite there being about 250 adults on the island. And honestly, that doesn't surprise me at all. I didn't really even expect to see it. The Iriomote cat isn't particularly large, but if a population can survive on 112 square miles while remaining undetected for years, what could hide in a few thousand square miles? Perhaps not a creature as big as the biggest Smilodon of times past, just because it's speculated they went extinct due to their prey going extinct, so it might be difficult for them to survive today. But perhaps smaller Smilodons could survive. But then, even if there are undiscovered cats, would they really have saber teeth?
He drove up and down the road screaming, "Here, kitty, kitty," out the window, and surprisingly, it didn't work. Imagine if John Wayne had a cat. "Here, kitty, kitty, kitty."
Well, to be fair, in some accounts, I didn't really get the sense that they definitely did have saber teeth, just because some descriptions were a bit vague. I mean, having big teeth doesn't necessarily mean saber tooth. Like, you might describe a lion or a tiger as having big teeth, and they do have big teeth, but they're not saber tooth. That said, though, at the same time, I don't see why not. Saber teeth have evolved many times in the animal kingdom, from proto-mammals, even in herbivorous land animals,
you,
and
Sunshine.
fish. In fact, it developed in nimrovids, they look like cats but weren't, and in barborophilids, which also weren't cats. And then we have the true saber-toothed cats, the Homotherium and Smilodon. The thing is, saber teeth have evolved independently many times, and failing that, some mutations could create long, if not necessarily, saber teeth. I mean, we see it sometimes in domestic cats. Perhaps a random mutation that caused larger canines could be passed down and
All right, so pygmy mammoths, six-fingered giants, and mammoth cheese. It's the first I've ever heard of mammoth cheese, although I am intrigued. I mean, yum. Yum.
populations of these secretive cats. Now, to be clear, I am still skeptical and cautious about claims, but at the same time, a little bit hopeful. In conclusion, let me leave you with this. Alan Turner, a paleontologist specializing in felines and mammals, and author of The Big Cats and Their Fossil Relatives, argues that extinctions do not happen randomly, nor are they caused by evolutionary failures to adapt, and believes that some animal groups have disappeared simply in response to relatively short-term circumstantial changes. He believes that saber-toothed felines, as well as other prehistoric species, could survive today if they were in a suitable environment. So what do you think? Will we find some saber-tooth still out there today?
I have a lot more teeth than your average meth gator, that's for sure. All right, so now we're going to move straight into the horrific.
First, I want to thank all
of Ed Gein. Now, this particular flavor of Ed Gein is by way of a channel. Pin the link. Nope, that was the wrong thing to do. I meant to do that. Evil Among Us, the horrific crimes of Ed Gein. Now, this guy gets a little bit difficult to understand occasionally. So if we get confused, it does seem a little sus, but I mean, you know, true crime people, if you're going to do true crime, inevitably you're going to have to do Ed Gein eventually. And I'm sure he would appreciate that even from beyond the grave.
all of you for your support, and especially the Republic of Ireland and Carissa Chubb, who recommended this case. The name Ed Gein is well known.
I got a chub.
But I'm not sure all the details are, and I hope to rectify that. Anyway, on with the video. Ed Gein, known as the Butcher of Plainfield, was a deeply disturbed man who in 1954 and 1957 killed two local women, Mary Hogan and Bernice Worden, in the village of Plainfield in the state of Wisconsin, although he likely killed at least three and maybe more, making him a serial killer. However, it's not just the fact that he killed people, which has led to Gein being the inspiration for some of the most famous characters in horror,
I wish I had a little piece too. Mine's as big as a straw hat.
including Norman Bates from Psycho, Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs. It's what he did to his victims, his nocturnal activities, and the contents of his home, which has meant that the name Ed Gein has gone down in infamy. Gein is known to have exhumed the bodies of at least 9 women from local graveyards,
Buffy.
and he fashioned parts of their bodies into macabre trophies, which decorated his home. This included a belt made from human nipples, a lampshade made from the skin of a human face, and a bodysuit made from the skin of deceased women.
Right? We're just going to go ahead and wear our victims. Hey, Diabolical Debbie, welcome in. It's good to see you. I kind of like she got some spooky stuff over there. If it's what I'm thinking of, she do spooky. She do spooky real good.
Both of his victims ended up this same way, and upon his eventual arrest,
Do y'all realize what that is that you're looking at right there? It just occurred to me. This
the bodies of at least 9 women from local
is
graveyards,
actually,
and he fashioned parts of their bodies into macabre trophies, which decorated his home. This included a belt made from human nipples,
nipples. Yes, human nipples.
a lampshade made from the skin of a human face, and a bodysuit made from the skin of deceased women. Both of his victims ended up this same way, and upon his eventual arrest, officers were confronted with the headless body of his second victim, Bernice Worden,
I kind of resemble Joe Dirt, grows in all white and trashy like this.
hung upside down like an animal carcass. This case is horrific, shocking, but also, at its core, incredibly tragic. Welcome to Evil Among Us. Edward Theodore.
All right. So, barring the fact that this man's voice is much like a Valium, everything else I have no complaints on with his channel. I mean, he could maybe do a decent line before he started reading, but other than that, it's a little drony, but for all that, it has excellent information. I love it.
Gein, known as Ed, was born on August 27th, 1906, in the city of La Crosse, in the state of Wisconsin, to George and Augusta Gein. He also had an older brother, Henry, who was 5 years older than him. Gein's home life was what shaped the man he became, with his father George being a violent alcoholic bully who was frequently unemployed and would often beat his sons and his wife. His mother, Augusta, despised George with a passion, but due to her religious beliefs, she could not divorce him, so she had a pit of absolute hatred inside of her. In terms of her religious beliefs, she can correctly, in my opinion, be called a fanatic and was fervently Lutheran, which, from looking it up, appears to be part of the Protestant faith. Their beliefs appear to include the fact that the Bible is the ultimate authority, and that, due to the actions of Adam and Eve, all human thoughts and actions are rooted in sin, that only faith in God alone can lead to salvation. So basically, we're all sinners, and everything is terrible, and only God can save us. Sounds like an incredibly dark view of the world. Unfortunately, it was this view that Augusta used to indoctrinate her 2 boys. Every afternoon, literally from the time that Gein was able to sit up on his own, she would set aside time to read to them from the Bible, usually selecting passages from the Old Testament, dealing with death, murder, and divine retribution. She would use these verses to justify and bolster her beliefs that the world as a whole was immoral, alcohol and sex were evil, and that all women, although not herself, were prostitutes, promiscuous, and the spawn of Satan. Both children would sit and listen, but Henry did so to placate his mother. Gein, on the other hand, would sit fixated on what his mother was saying, taking in every word and trusting what she said completely. When Gein was born, Augusta ran a successful grocery business, but in 1914, when he was 8 years old, she purchased a 155-acre farm in the tiny village of Plainfield. It seems she did this specifically to isolate the boys from the outside world, but also, more broadly, to move the family from the city and all the sinners who lived there. The farm, which would be the scene of so much horror years later, was at least a mile from the nearest neighbours. The children spent most of their time there and would only leave for school. Both boys attended a local grade school, which was a tiny one-room building with 12 students. Gein was born with a growth on his left eyelid, causing it to droop, and also had a lesion on his tongue, which caused a speech impediment, meaning that he was considered odd and bullied by his classmates. He was also noted as acting very bizarrely. He would often be seen randomly laughing, apparently to jokes that only he could hear. This was no doubt an indicator of the condition that he would later be diagnosed with, schizophrenia. Gein was isolated and lonely throughout his childhood, but if he ever tried to make friends, Augusta would beat him severely. This was on top of the...
That's a little nerve-wracking, I'm not going to lie, because I've been known to laugh at jokes that only I could hear. I don't really hear them. It's just that I had a funny thought, right? And once it starts, man, I can't control it. It just starts me up giggling in the worst possible situations.
The beatings he got from his father, which on occasions were so brutal that he'd be knocked out for hours and experienced frequent headaches, dizziness, and blackouts for days afterwards. If Gein ever showed any signs of sexual desire, then he would be punished. On one occasion, Augusta caught her son masturbating, so grabbed his penis and testicles in her hand and called them, quote, the curse of a man. I need to break it to pull all this together. Firstly, I want to say what an awful, awful woman Augusta was. She was clearly an extremely bitter, twisted woman who hated her own life, but due to her religious beliefs, she felt trapped. So her way to cope with this was to rail about everything to her sons, indoctrinating them to believe that everyone, aside from her, was evil. Also, that normal human desires and activity were sinful, such as sex, despite her clearly not practicing what she preached, considering she had 2 sons. Also, her logic makes no sense. So sex is bad, so we should stop having sex, so the human race dies out. Yeah, right. In order to regain a sense of power in her life, Augusta essentially created a mini cult involving 3 people, with her being the dear leader, a woman, almost a myth, who was so superior to others, with her using fear and isolation tactics to maintain her hold over her sons completely, and utterly brainwashing Gein, and trying, but ultimately failing, to do so with Henry. If they questioned dear leader, they'd be beaten. As I said, later in life, Gein would be diagnosed as schizophrenic. This is a serious lifelong mental health condition where the sufferer can experience hallucinations, delusions, and disordered thinking and behaviour, with them often having extremely bizarre beliefs, which are sometimes abhorrent and on some occasions dangerous. The exact causes of schizophrenia are not known, but it's likely the result of a combination of physical, genetic, psychological, and environmental factors. Regardless, in the case of Gein, due to his condition, he was far more inclined to take the word of his mother at face value, despite the bust-sized holes in her logic and a clear malicious intent behind her actions. And so he began to form a horrifying worldview, with his mother as the sole light in a world of darkness, which was full of death, sin, violence, and whores.
Good to see you, buddy.
Women, aside from his mother,
Welcome
were to be mistrusted and hated. This was reinforced in day in, day out, and without any other outside influences, he had nothing to counter the bullshit he was being fed, and no doubt his indoctrination resulted in Ed Gein having no remorse or empathy for others. Basically, it was a psychopath raising another psychopath. However, despite Gein's mother trying to suppress his sexual thoughts and feelings, they naturally came out, and with his repeated exposure to violence, both in terms of the abuse he suffered and the stories he heard, this is what started to arouse him. Later, it will be reported by Gein that when he was 7 years old, he had an orgasm while watching his parents kill a pig. So Gein developed, amongst other things, a link between sexual arousal and gratification and acts of violence and death. There's one question that's been posed repeatedly about whether Gein and his mother had an incestuous relationship. We will never know the answer to this, but it should be pointed out that Gein would often share a bed with his mother,
what kind of friends
and
you
this
be
would
hanging
continue
around
into
with?
adulthood. Based on this, it does seem likely that something happened between them. Even if it didn't, I think that Gein sexually desired her. She was the model woman, the only one he had contact with, the only virtuous woman who existed in the entire world. I think it's very likely that Gein either did engage in sexual acts with his mother, or wanted this to happen, and thoughts of this were likely the source of his masturbatory fantasies. Gein's father George appears to have taught his son nothing, apart from one skill he would use to horrifying effect in his later life. Specifically, his father worked as a tanner, a profession which involves the treatment of animal skins to make leather. Gein's father George died in 1940, when Gein was around 34 years old. This death didn't impact him significantly for 2 reasons. Firstly, his father was, for the whole of his life, a violent bully. But secondly, the centre of his world, his mother Augusta, was alive and continued to wield control over her son. In order to support the family, both Gein and Henry worked odd jobs in the local area, including being general handymen, and Gein even babysat for neighbours. He got on well with children, being quite childlike himself. There were never any concerns about Gein's behaviour around anyone in the local community. He was considered quiet, very meek and strange, but a polite man. By this point, Henry was starting to rebel. He was no longer enamoured with his mother and began to question her teachings. He wanted to go out and see the world. He He was not interested in being confined anymore. He would badmouth Augusta to
Boopy. Welcome in, Snark. Good to see you, girl.
Gein, which angered him. However, before Henry could escape, he'd be dead. On May the 16th, 1944, a brush fire broke out close to the farm. Both Henry and Gein went to fight the fire. The fire was put out, but then apparently Gein became separated from his brother in the dark, and the police were called. The next day, a search party was organised, but bizarrely, Gein led the party straight to his brother's body. Henry's body was not in an area where the fire had taken hold. He was found to have bruising to his head, indicating he'd been struck with some sort of heavy object. The police were suspicious, but the coroner ruled, despite the circumstances, that Henry had died from asphyxia as a result of smoke inhalation. Based on this, no charges were filed. Many authors since, and investigators at the time, believe that Gein killed his brother. I think this is likely correct. I think that Henry trying to break away from the family was seen by Gein as a defiance of the authority of his mother. This couldn't be tolerated, and like other cults, dissent had to be punished, so Henry was killed. I'd imagine that Henry said something derogatory about Augusta whilst tensions were high while they were fighting the fire, and Gein potentially hit him. This may mean the death was accidental, or potentially it was premeditated, as Gein saw Henry as an impediment to him having his mother all to himself. We will never know, but due to the death of Henry, Gein did indeed have his mother all to himself, but this wouldn't be for long. Augusta's health began to fail soon after the death of Henry, and she had a number of strokes, and Gein cared for her. Despite being in ill health and frail, Augusta continued to inject her poison into her son's mind. Gein later recalled an incident, months before his mother's death, where they'd gone to visit a man called Smith who lived nearby, for the purpose of purchasing straw. When they got there, they witnessed Smith beating a dog. A woman came out and told Smith to stop, but Smith ignored her and beat the dog to death. Augusta was shocked by this scene, but not the fact that a dog had just been beaten to death in front of her. No, she was disgusted with the woman who had spoken to Smith, and was quick to tell her son the pair weren't married, and that she was, quote, Smith's harlot. Augusta eventually passed away on December the 29th,
Well, that
1940.
settles it. I got to find me a harlot. That's exactly what I've been missing in my life. Good old-fashioned harlot. See? Yeah. Good plan. Good plan.
45. This loss completely devastated Gein. He'd lost his only friend, the centre of his world, his teacher, and had been left with nothing. His mother had shielded him from the real world.
Yeah, I think Ed Gein is a poster child for crazy. I mean, it wasn't so much his murderous inclinations that makes him a bad person. It's all the other shit he did after his mama died. And we have no idea what all he did before she died. And keep in mind, she was pretty much paraplegic and helpless in this man's care for months and months.
He had no idea how to function. This is where I have a great deal of sympathy for Ed Gein. He was a man who'd been indoctrinated for years, the product of an extremely abusive mother, and now he was completely alone. The devastation of his mother's loss meant the dam burst, and Ed Gein completely disconnected from reality. And despite her death, Augusta's influence on her son would continue from beyond the grave, leading to her son devoting the rest of his life as a free man to engaging in perverse, sexually motivated acts of complete depravity, whilst also punishing women for their sins.
Well, I'm not so sure he could be qualified as a serial killer. So
After
much as
Augusta's
he was
death,
a deviant.
Gein's life fell apart. The farm he lived in fell into disrepair. He boarded up any room that his mother had used, including most of the upstairs and downstairs, and the living room, and confined himself to one room next to the kitchen, where he spent most of his days living in squalor and fixated with death. He would indulge his interest by reading books about the Nazis, especially the experiments conducted on the Jews in the extermination camps, as well as articles about how shrunken heads were made, and books on anatomy, and stories about people who exhumed dead bodies to sell. I've no doubt that Gein would masturbate whilst reading these stories. Gein would, on the occasions where he needed to travel to the store for supplies, eagerly tell patrons about what he read, further reinforcing their perception that he was an extremely strange, but ultimately harmless man who was just struggling to come to terms with the death of his mother. Gein became fascinated in particular with human anatomy, working out how to take bodies apart. Gein could not bear to be parted from his mother,
Right?
and in
Handmade.
1947, he dug up her body and twisted her head from her corpse, took it home, and made a shrunken head from it, following the instructions she'd read in books. This way, his mother was still with him. Between 1947 and 1951, Gein began trying to put other aspects of the things he'd learnt into practice and scoured obituaries apparently for middle-aged women who resembled his mother. However, this doesn't seem to be entirely accurate, which I'll return to later. He'd then go to the various grave sites, sometimes within hours of the deceased being laid to rest. Gein apparently made as many as 40 of these trips to 3 local graveyards and is known to have exhumed around 9 corpses, which would then take back to the farmyard. A detail I didn't know until researching this case was that Gein didn't act alone. During these morbid trips to the graveyards, he befriended a gravedigger known as Gus, who assisted him in exhuming some of the bodies. I know nothing else about this man, aside from the fact that he was elderly, and, in some reports, he's described as a farmer and not a gravedigger. While at the farm, he would explore the dead bodies. Gein denied that he'd ever had sex with any of the bodies, because, quote, they smelled too bad. I think Gein potentially didn't go this far, but I have no doubt that touching these women's bodies, who reminded him of his mother, made him sexually aroused. He likely masturbated over these corpses. It's clear, based on the trophies that he took, that Gein showed particular interest in the genitals
What's up,
and
Machine
breast area of the
Sheriff? Good to see you,
corpses.
bud. Welcome
I'll
back.
get to the full
We're
list of the
looking at
items
some
found in
some
Gein's
more
home later.
monsters, you know.
He would use the
Ed
skills
Gein
his
is
father had
definitely
taught
a
him
monster.
and information he'd read to dissect the bodies and turn them into macabre ornaments and trophies, turning his home into a shrine to death. This is something I think he believed his mother would be proud of, as this is what she had taught him. Life was essentially damnation. However, the primary focus of Gein was to fashion what was later described as a, quote, woman's suit, which he made from the skin of the women whose graves he robbed. He would then drape this over himself and run around the farmland in a state of excitement and euphoria. Why he did this is unclear, whether he believed he was now Augusta or this was some sort of homage to her, but I have no doubt that sexual arousal and gratification was a key part of this behaviour. I believe there were likely several reasons why Gein...
Or is this guy seemingly fixated on Ed Gein's sexual arousal involving the necrophiliac aspect of all of this? Might have shied away from that one myself.
escalated to murder. Firstly, I think over the course of 4 years, he'd become desensitised to his behaviour with corpses that had been dead for some time. It wasn't giving him the sexual thrill he needed. There also seems to have been a practical issue, with Gus having apparently gone to live elsewhere, potentially some sort of nursing home, so it'd be difficult, almost impossible, for Gein to be able to dig up a body on his own in one night without being seen and caught the next day. However, I also think that by killing women, he thought he was ridding the world of the whores his mother told him all women were. So Gein went looking for targets. His first victim was Mary Hogan, who in 1954 was a 51-year-old divorcee who operated Hogan's Tavern, 6 miles from Gein's home. She resembled Gein's mother, but was her antithesis in personality. She was nicknamed, quote, Bloody Mary, due to being foul-mouthed and crude. However, these were the traits which enamoured her to all her patrons. She was known as an extremely friendly, funny and caring woman. Of course, any woman will fall short of the complete fabrication of a perfect woman fed to Gein by his mother, and so Mary Hogan was chosen to die. Gein later confessed to killing Mary, but claimed he couldn't remember exactly what had happened. However, it seems that just before or after closing time on the 8th of December 1954, Gein arrived and entered the tavern. He then shot Mary in the head with a .32 Mauser pistol before transporting her remains back to the farm. He then spent time dissecting her body, keeping various parts of her, which were discovered later, including her skull, which was found in a box, and her face, which was found in a paper bag. Again, Gein wore this mask as part of his link to his mother, either being some sort of sick tribute to her, or, in his twisted mind, him becoming her. Sexual gratification and sexual excitement is at the core of what Gein did. I have no doubt the violence turned him on, possibly to the point of orgasm. He masturbated whilst dissecting Mary, and likely whilst wearing her face as a mask. That's definitely a sentence I never thought I'd say. Mary's disappearance was reported to the police.
I have my doubts there, brother. I kind of feel like you might have been waiting on it.
police, but it would not be until Gein's confession, 3 years later, that her horrific end would be known. Ed Gein killed again on November the 16th, 1957, and his target this time was 58-year-old Bernice Worden, who ran a hardware store in Plainfield. This was one of the few places that Gein regularly visited, so it's unclear whether he targeted her because of opportunity or because she somehow was deemed sinful and therefore deserved to die, because of something that Gein or his serpent of a mother had determined. To be fair, it seems it was sin to be any woman, aside from his mother. At around 9 AM, Gein walked into the shop to buy antifreeze, and he had apparently made this purchase before he took a .22 rifle from a display and loaded it with a bullet he had in his pocket and shot Bernice in the head. He then locked up the store and loaded her body into the hardware store's truck, which was seen driving away from the rear of the building by a witness at 9:30 AM. Gein took Bernice's body back to the farm and set about mutilating it, spending all day and that night in his sickening task. The hardware store had few visitors, so it wasn't until around 5 PM, so 8 hours after the murder, that Bernice's son, Deputy Sheriff Frank Worden, came round and felt something was wrong. He became alarmed when he found the shop locked, as it usually stayed open until 6 PM. He broke in and found the cash register open and blood on the floor. He also saw a receipt in his mother's handwriting for a gallon of antifreeze. Frank remembered a few days ago that Gein had been in the store and said to his mother he needed antifreeze and be back in a few days. This small detail meant that Ed Gein became the main suspect. Without this, it's very likely that Bernice's murder would have gone unsolved and Gein would have killed again. At around 8 PM, Ed Gein was located at a nearby store and arrested. His reign of terror and his life as a free man was at an end. He was taken to Washoe County Jail for questioning. Please be warned, this section of the video is disturbing and macabre, as I intend to...
Are we man enough to face it, or do we want to skip it? Because it does get pretty fucking graphic. Although some of it's kind of blurred out. So it's certainly not the worst of the worst.
Let's go through in detail everything that's found in Gein's property, along with showing pictures, although one or two I'll leave out due to them being too graphic. If I include them, the video may be taken down. So, on November the 17th, 1957, Deputy Frank Worden, son of missing Bernice Worden, and Sheriff Art Schley walked onto Ed Gein's property looking for Bernice.
Me too, but
at that point, they didn't realise they'd walked into a living nightmare. In a shed on Gein's property, Frank came face to face with the remains of his mother. She'd been decapitated, and her body was found hung upside down by her legs. A crossbar had been used to separate her ankles, and her hands were tied with the rope suspended from the ceiling. She'd been cut open from navel to her breastbone so that her internal organs could be removed, and was, quote, dressed out like a deer. But this discovery was just the beginning. The full list of items found in Gein's property goes as follows. With regard to Bernice Worden, her decapitated head was found in a burlap sack, and her heart was found in a bag in front of Gein's stove. With regards to his first victim, Mary Hogan, her skull was found in a box, whilst a mask made out of her face was found in a paper bag. As to everything else, police found numerous human bones and fragments, a wastebasket made out of human skin, several chairs covered with human skin, skulls on the bedposts, various female skulls, some with the top sawn off, bowls made out of human skin, various masks from the faces of female corpses, Gein's skin suit, leggings made from skin from human legs, 9 vulvas in a shoebox, with the vulva being the opening of the vagina, the vaginal lips, and the clitoris, a young girl's dress, the vulvas of 2 girls, aged to be around 14 or 15 years old, 4 noses, a pair of lips on a window shade drawstring, fingernails from female fingers, a lampshade made out of a human face, and a belt made from female nipples. I'm sure that no one who saw the inside of this farm would ever forget it, and the discoveries meant that Gein quickly confessed not only to the murders of Bernice Worden and Mary Hogan, but also robbing the graves of 9 women and desecrating their bodies. Whilst the mind behind Ed Gein was clearly deeply deranged and disturbed, his hands worked with purpose. he perfected his craft to the point where his mutilation of these bodies was done with care and precision. This included removing women's faces in one piece with a high level of skill, as well as him going to great lengths to treat the skin by tanning it. Emotions were raw, and one of the officers who first entered the house, Sheriff Art Schley, beat the living shit out of Gein, slamming his head into a brick wall. Unfortunately, this would mean that his confession was later deemed inadmissible and thrown out of court. On November the 21st, 1957, Ed Gein was arraigned for the first-degree murder of Bernice Worden. He was not arraigned for the murder of Mary Hogan, apparently due to financial reasons. Gein pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity and was assessed by a psychiatrist who found that he was suffering from schizophrenia and that he was unfit to stand trial. Gein was held for 10 years in Mendota State Hospital in Madison, Wisconsin, before he was finally deemed fit to stand trial, which began on November the 7th, 1968. As he was only on trial for murdering Bernice Worden, he didn't have to provide an explanation as to why he killed Mary Hogan, although it was acknowledged that he was responsible for her death. With regards to Bernice, Gein claimed he could not tell whether he shot her by accident or deliberately, and he claimed that after her death, he couldn't remember anything. Same with desecrating people's graves. He couldn't remember how or why he did it. Whilst it was determined that Ed Gein was responsible for the death of Bernice Worden, he was found not guilty by reason of insanity, i.e. because of mental disorder, he couldn't tell that his actions were illegal. This sentence doesn't mean a person gets off scot-free. They still killed someone. It just means they would not be sent to prison. And so Ed Gein was committed to hospital for the rest of his life and spent his remaining years in the Central State Hospital for the criminally insane. Ed Gein eventually died aged 77 from respiratory failure linked to lung cancer on the 26th of July 1984. His crimes earned him a morbid cult status in certain circles, and Ed Gein's headstone at the Plainfield Cemetery became a shrine, and people would travel from far and wide to touch it and chip bits off of it until it was stolen in the year 2000. It was recovered a year later, but wasn't replaced to stop the Gawkers. There were fears that the farmhouse would also become a morbid tourist attraction, but on the 20th of March 1958, it mysteriously burnt down. The cause of the fire was never determined. Also in 1958, property of Gein's was sold at auction, and a man named Bunny Gibbons, a funfair owner, won Gein's maroon 1949 Ford sedan, which he'd used to move the bodies of his victims. Gibbons began displaying the car almost immediately, calling it, quote, Ed Gein's Ghoul Car. Interest was high initially when it first went on display in Seymour, Wisconsin, with 2,000 people paying 25 cents each to sit in the car that Ed Gein used to transport the dead. However, this interest eventually waned over time. I've no idea where the car ended up. Ed Gein's crimes have continued to fascinate and horrify in the more than 60 years since he committed them, and almost 40 years since his death, with him being the inspiration for various horror movie icons such as Norman Bates, Leatherface, and Buffalo Bill.
All
I
right.
think it's highly likely that Ed Gein killed
Do we believe that Ed Gein had more victims than we know of?
at least 3 people, but I believe his total might be many more. There's one crime in particular I want to focus on, and that's the disappearance and presumed murder of 14-year-old Evelyn Grace Hartley. On October the 24th, 1953, Evelyn was babysitting at a property in La Crosse, Wisconsin. At 8:30 p.m., Evelyn's father called the house, but received no answer and was concerned, so drove over. Inside the property, the lights and radio were on, and there were clear signs of a struggle, with items scattered all over the house. Evelyn's shoes were found in different rooms, along with her broken glasses. There were no signs of her, but the child she was looking after, who was 20 months old, was found unharmed. A screen had been removed from a window, which had a stepladder leant against it. Blood, including a bloody handprint, was found in the area, and inquiries led to neighbours reporting hearing screaming around the time that Evelyn went missing. Her body was never found. And the link to Gein? On this date, he was visiting a relative a few blocks away from the house where Evelyn was babysitting. Gein was questioned about this murder, but denied any involvement and apparently passed a lie detector. However, I don't have much faith in this. Lie detectors are not 100% accurate, hence why they're not admissible in court. They're used to guide questioning, not to prove guilt in court. Also, testing people like Gein, who have a distorted perception of reality, can provide inaccurate results. What makes me think that Gein potentially committed this crime isn't just his proximity on the day, but also the fact that a female dress was found in his property, along with the vulvas of 2 girls who are around the same age as Evelyn. I don't know whether the owner of the dress was ever traced. This was obviously years before DNA, so it's never been established who these body parts belong to, whether they were murder victims or corpses that Gein exhumed, but they must have come from somewhere. In fact, potentially due to financial issues, it seems though not much investigation was done to try and identify the body parts found in Gein's property. I believe that many of these were disposed of, and it feels as though Plainfield just wanted to forget Ed Gein. In this respect, to this day, it's actually really unclear how many of the body parts that Ed Gein had in his possession came from women who died naturally or those he murdered. I'm really glad this case was recommended, as, although I knew some of the details, I didn't know the extent of Ed Gein's crimes. The profile of Ed Gein is difficult, as, like Richard Chase, he was a man who suffered from severe mental illness, and therefore it's likely that his motivations for what he did were known only to him, and, if he explained them, they wouldn't make much sense. I've already mentioned why I think Gein did what he did, and the background factors which led to this. Specifically, the indoctrination of his toxic mother twisted Gein's perception of reality and normal behaviour so utterly that after her death, he engaged in a bizarre and sickening campaign to live out his repressed sexual fantasies, indulge his fascination in death, and, in some ways, keep his mother alive by making a suit that he could wear, made from the skin of others, which he could parade around in and potentially believe he was his own mother. Although he may not have penetrated the victims, the fact that Gein was sexually aroused by death and inevitably masturbated in the presence of dead bodies means he was a necrophile. This is a term usually used exclusively to describe a person who has sex with corpses, but it's actually a more general term for those who have a sexual interest in dead bodies, which doesn't necessarily have to include sexual contact. My thoughts about Ed Gein seem to be in line with most of the theories I've read, but this is just what can be gleaned from his behaviour. Gein never provided any explanation for his offences and appeared to distance himself from his crimes after he was caught. However, I hate it when things don't fit, and I think the presence of body parts from children calls into question what we know about Ed Gein and what his true motivations were. These body parts seem to be glossed over in what I've read, but I think this is a mistake, as it doesn't fit the theory.
They don't say
As I said
so.
a minute ago, I believe it cannot
They
be
also don't say
discounted
he's
that
accountable.
at least one of the vulvas found in the property was from a girl who went missing when Gein was known to be in the area. However, if they didn't come from a murdered child, they must have come from a body he dug up. Gein would check the obituaries, so he would have known who was being buried, so it's not like he would have dug up a grave and found a child when he expects to find a grown woman. But, even if this did happen, he could have just left the body, but at some point, he'd mutilated the bodies of 2 children and removed their genital area. Whilst I think primarily Gein's mother fixation was the core of most of his offending, I am wondering whether he just liked killing for the sake of it. Perhaps killing gave him a sense of power and control when he felt so utterly lost and abandoned in his own life. Perhaps, as well as a sexual attraction to his mother, he had one for children. However, we will never truly know. The only person who could provide answers, Ed Gein himself, took his secrets to the grave almost 40 years ago. The name of Ed Gein is well known amongst true crime fans, but I'm hoping that my video added to your understanding of the man and his crimes. Anyway, if you like the content, please consider becoming a channel member.
Absolutely, bud. All those things that you say. So we have 2. I skipped the real Headless Horseman one. My bad. All right. So if I'm going to catch a copyright anything, it's going to happen on this video because he does show a double handful of Star Wars scenes, and we all know how quick Disney takes folks down. So do we do the real Headless Horseman first or the one that's actually in the list? Because apparently I missed that one. Yeah, that dude. Right. Didn't he start throwing parties at his pig farm and have a pig farm that only had like 5 pigs, but was regularly exporting meat and stuff? Yeah, I know you do. Imagine this. Everyone around there bought meat from him, and all he really served with humans, other humans, so they wouldn't want to make it public that they had unintentionally eaten human meat. Yeah, no, I mean, that might work. There was this guy, I think it was in Utah, I think, and he was selling beef jerky, but it wasn't beef. It was people. It was people jerky. Yeah, I know of Disney, but okay, we'll do Headless Horseman then.
An opening in the trees now cheered him with the hopes. An opening in the trees now cheered him with the hopes that the church bridge was at hand. The wavering reflection of a silver star in the bosom of the brook told him that he was not mistaken. He saw the walls of the church dimly glaring under the trees beyond. He recollected the place where Brom Bones's ghostly competitor had disappeared. If I can but reach that bridge, thought Ichabod, I am safe. Just then he heard the black steed panting and blowing close behind him. He even fancied that he felt his hot breath. Another convulsive kick in the ribs, and old Gunpowder sprang upon the bridge. He thundered over the resounding planks. He gained the opposite side, and now Ichabod cast a look behind to see if his pursuer should vanish according to rule in a flash of fire and brimstone. Just then he saw the goblin rising in his stirrups and in the very act of hurling his head at him. Ichabod endeavored to dodge the horrible missile, but too late. It encountered his cranium with a tremendous crash. He was tumbled headlong into the dust, and Gunpowder, the black steed, and the goblin rider passed by like a whirlwind. The next morning, the old horse was found without his saddle and with the bridle under his feet, soberly cropping at the grass at his master's gate. Ichabod did not make his appearance at breakfast. Was Washington Irving writing from first-hand accounts when he penned his timeless tale of Ichabod Crane and the infamous Headless Horseman? Or was he just adding his modern-day twist of folklore that had been told for centuries? Today we take a look at the legend of Sleepy Hollow and ask a simple question. Was there a real Headless Horseman? The answer might surprise you. So if you're curious, let's take a walk through history.
What do you think, folks? Real Headless Horseman or no? I mean, I'll buy a story about somebody who turned over their head for a ransom, so why not somebody who didn't have a head and rode a horse?
The legend of Sleepy Hollow resurfaces every year around Halloween. Washington Irving's 1820 tale of a Headless Horseman is considered one of America's first ghost stories and one of its scariest. The story takes place in the New York village of Sleepy Hollow in Westchester County. In it, lanky schoolmaster Ichabod Crane courts Katrina Van Tassel, a young heiress who is also being pursued by the Dutchman Brom Bones. After being rebuffed by Katrina at a party at the Van Tassel's farm, Ichabod is chased by a headless horseman who hurls his head at the man, throwing Ichabod from his horse, and the schoolmaster vanishes. Certainly a great Halloween classic, but it might surprise you to know that the story, with all its supernatural charm, is grounded in reality. The true story of Sleepy Hollow can be traced to Washington Irving's early years. In 1798, 15-year-old Irving left his native home of New York City to flee a yellow fever outbreak and made his way north to Tarrytown, where his friend James Kirk Paulding lived. As time passed, Irving garnered a respectable reputation as a writer, but there was no real job prospects for him in America, so he left Tarrytown for Birmingham, England. His sister Sarah and her husband Henry Van Wert were already residing. It was there that Irving, plagued by writer's block, was struck with renewed inspiration to write. It seems a conversation with his brother-in-law had awakened in him old memories of his time in the Hudson Valley. As a youngster in Tarrytown, he had been introduced to local ghost stories and lore, so it makes sense that Irving would began to write about these legends in a collection of shorts called The Sketchbook. Under the pseudonym Jeffrey Crayon, yes, Jeffrey Crayon, Irving wrote 34 essays and short stories in The Sketchbook.
Is this of the Crayola crayons?
Which became the first widely read works of American literature in Britain and Europe. In it were two giant literary short stories, Rip Van Winkle and The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. The story has many references to people and places that Irving actually encountered while growing up in Tarrytown. The village of Sleepy Hollow is in fact a real place. It was known as North Tarrytown, sitting just across the Pocatello River from Tarrytown proper. Citizens voted to rename their town as Sleepy Hollow in 1996. But Sleepy Hollow in Irving's story, and indeed the Sleepy Hollow that existed when he wrote it, wasn't a town at all. It was indeed a hollow, which usually comprises of an area much larger than any one village. In this case, you could consider Sleepy Hollow the entire Pocatello River Valley. But it would certainly have had a dirt road or a horse path and a church that sat just beyond a bridge. The original Headless Horseman Bridge was a simple wooden span that has long since rotted away and has been rebuilt and reimagined at least 5 different times, finally ending up as the concrete and steel structure one sees today. The old Dutch church and the churchyard are real too. The church, in all its old world charm, was built in 1697 and is the second oldest existing church and the 15th oldest existing building in the state of New York. Aside from the structures, there is a striking similarity to real people in Tarrytown and the characters in the story. Katerina Van Tassel's grave in the churchyard has often been associated with the inspiration for Irving's muse, Katrina. This probably isn't the case, though. Katerina was a middle-aged woman when Irving was in Tarrytown, and her personality didn't fit the part. Instead, evidence points to her niece, Eleanor Van Tassel. Now, Eleanor's timeline better aligns with Irving's youth. She was in her late 20s during his formative years. Their families were well acquainted, and it's plausible that Eleanor's vibrant personality and alluring character captured Irving's imagination and served as the inspiration for the enchanting Katrina. In the creation of the character Brom Van Brunt, also known as Brom Bones, Irving drew inspiration from 2 men, both blacksmiths named Brom. The first, and most notable, was Abram Brom Martling, a heroic war veteran who played a crucial role in organizing Tarrytown's defenses during the Revolution. His most daring adventure involved leading a group of followers on a secret mission to burn down a Tory leader's house in retaliation for the burning of the Van Tassel residence in 1777. Their successful return to the Patriot lines turned them into instant heroes. The second Brom was Abram Van Alstyne. This Brom played a prank on schoolmaster Jesse Merwin, tricking him to propose to his long-suffering fiancée, Jane Van Dyke. Merwin, who lacked confidence and was hesitant to pop the question, found himself pursued by a spectral horseman wrapped in sheets one night after leaving Jane's house. Sound familiar? The prankster's cackling laughter revealed his identity, and the prank had the desired effect on Merwin. He took the hint, proposed to Jane, and married her, avoiding a lifetime of similar pranks and teasing. By the way, the schoolmaster Jesse Merwin, if you haven't already surmised, was Irving's inspiration for Ichabod Crane. And then there's the Headless Horseman. According to the New York Historical Society, Irving may have been inspired by an actual Hessian soldier who was decapitated by a cannonball during the Battle of White Plains around Halloween 1776. General George Washington's inexperienced army was in full retreat after suffering a crushing defeat at the Battle of Long Island. He ordered his troops to prepare a hasty defense near White Plains. There, on the eve of Halloween, American forces engaged a combined force of British and Hessian soldiers. Lieutenant Ephraim Fenno assumed command of a lone artillery battery on top of a hill overlooking White Plains. Fenno fired a single cannonball at advancing Hessian troops, decapitating one of them and effectively ending the assault. According to the book Once Upon a Time in the American Revolution, Soldier Anthony Maxwell is said to have witnessed the unfortunate death firsthand and talked about it for years after. And in his 1798 memoir, Major General William Heath wrote, "A shot from the American cannon at this place," White Plains, "took off the head of a Hessian artilleryman." Now, let's not forget that artillerymen used horses to pull their cannons across the countryside, and most artillery brigades had officers that rode on horseback. Could this be our Horseman? Today, a small placard marks the spot where the lone Hessian lost his head, less than 8 miles from Sleepy Hollow. What's interesting is that the Van Tassels may have ties to the Hessian soldier. The Van Tassel farm was burnt down by Hessian and British soldiers. Elizabeth's baby Leah was nowhere to be found. One of the Hessians took Elizabeth to a shed where a soldier had baby Leah wrapped in a blanket. The Van Tassels were so grateful that when the headless soldier was found, they insisted on giving him a proper burial in case it was the soldier who helped them. Supposedly, the corpse of the beheaded Hessian was buried at the old Dutch church graveyard in Sleepy Hollow, and it was believed that the Hessian would arise at night in search of his head. Anyone who was ill-fated enough to come across his apparition, well, you know the story. Washington Irving didn't invent the idea of a headless horseman. Tales of headless riders can be traced to the Middle Ages, and it's almost certain he was influenced by those tales. Perhaps the Van Tassels really did bury the Hessian in the old Dutch church graveyard, and he rises from the grave every night to look for his head. I'm not of the mind to wait around to find out, but I can say that there indeed was a Hessian soldier, perhaps riding a horse, who had his head separated from his body, and for a brief moment was indeed the Headless Horseman.
Right body parts, right mode of transport, right time period, with the right injuries. It works for me. So is the general consensus, don't mess with the House of Mouse? Because I do have a little bit of like bullshit I can put in the background. Okay. So tomorrow I am doing some discussing with Mandatory Carry on his channel at 8 p.m. Eastern. And somebody keeps sending me messages on Facebook, and I can't check them right now. Next Sunday, we're doing episode 2 of The Blast Radius, me and Captain Curmudgeon. I'm kind of tempted to make a swing at the House of Mouse anyway, just because, you know, yeah, I'm a wild child. I don't know how to abide by my elders. Perhaps that's the problem. That's what my pops always said. Either save the world or destroy it. Since I haven't saved it, let's get started. I don't know, bud. I don't know. I'm gonna grab a handful of like some visuals. He's given me a general topic that we're gonna talk about. We're gonna do that, and then as far as I know, the Blast Radius is going to be a surprise. Maybe another speech. I can't remember. Maybe I think he said something about a this day in history type thing, which I think is pretty cool. That could be real neat. We just got to figure out whether or not all of his monetization stuff actually hooks up right. Whenever, if I start the stream, can he attach to it and use his monetization on it? I don't know. I mean, it's his channel. If he's willing to put up the content, it should work for him. I haven't had an opportunity to check that. I don't know what to tell you. Hey, I got one of these. I made this. I did it.
Tactical nuke incoming!
because you got to have, you know, some distinction between segments. I need at least one more, maybe two more transitions like that, 10 seconds or so, 8 seconds. And I think that would pretty well handle it. Oh, I also got a couple other things. I got this. Wait, no. Oh yeah. Right, I got that thing. And then where's it at? No, not that. This thing, which I think is pretty cool. Because that'll allow us to filter people without risking the whole, you know, the full on thing with the stuff and the thing, you know. Because nobody wants to be hit with German scat corn mid freaking stream. And that's how that goes. That's how it works. When you start dropping links in the chat, you almost inevitably end up with some freaking roughneck out there who decides he's gonna use his Cheeto stained fingers to make a difference in the YouTube sphere. I find it's easier just not to give them the opportunity. Just to take that out of the equation. Plus, it'll let me do things like I can pop one of these up for a second, change my layout, pop it right back down. Kind of the same thing I'm going to use this for.
Tactical nuke incoming!
Right. Because I mean, that is something I have noticed on other people's streams. A lot of times people in chat really don't like it when you start moving things around on the screen. They'll be like, oh, no, we're not doing no. Mm-mm. Crazy, wacky people. Yep. Nope. Oh,
In the freezing.
Oh my god. Oh! Oh!
I'm not sure what you expected to have happen, but that's physics for you. Yeah, we're just fine. Letting a frozen butt. It's good. Oh, that is unfortunate. Yeah. I think it's time to get an Airbnb somewhere on a mountainside. Oh, that Camry better watch out. Oh, that's not good. It's not good. It's not good.
Break.
Hello, Andrew. Welcome in. Good to see you, bud. Oh!
That was the biggest one.
Gravity works. Oh! This is bad luck. What a moron!
I don't even know what this is. Tiffany Mountain. You. What's up? What the?
Her name is Celeste, or maybe Destiny. Probably like a Starling, or maybe a Nikki. That's a Nikki for you right there. Oh, yeah, good girl. This is no good. Never when it's cold. Don't do this when it's cold. Ever. Yeah. No, that's what happens every time when it's cold.
Take 19 liters of Dr. Pepper, pour it into one of these, refill the water jugs. Take I think 40 Mentos. Pop them in.
Ooh, ooh, what was that? What did I miss?
I think 40 Mentos. Refillable water jugs. Take, I think 40 Mentos. Pop them in.
Randy, you're holding it too high! Stop!
Oh, what's up, Mitch? Good to see you, brother.
Grandma, I got that on video.
Set, go.
Yes, yes. Oh! Ow. Dude, that dude straight wrapped around that pole. Oh my God. I felt every joint in my body crack when he wrapped around that pole. Ooh, I hope he was really, really drunk. Snatch. There you go. Ow.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
You can't park there.
Oof.
Oh, no, no, no. Right? Because there's rednecks on every continent. Oh, yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's amphibious. Yeet! Yeet! Ah!
What is that? That's a mattress.
Bye!
Well, after the storm here, she blew a big drift, and well, we got the problem here.
Wait a second. What did I just see? Is that car full of snow?
Well, after the storm here, she blew a big drift, and well, we got the problem here.
Oh. Oh, dear. Bet you there's fishes. Catch it. We can eat.
Hey, I never asked you. Yeah. You like guacamole?
Oh, this is a bad idea. Uh-oh. She lose her skates? That's rough. Then I'll just back up before it's all the way up. Wait until it clears the lights and just go. There you go. That's how you do it. Ow.
Hurry.
You know this would be me right here. It's just as soon as I find one of those things, I'm climbing on it, and then I'm going to fall down and be viral. Wee. Yeet. Now you have a mobile home. Congratulations. Houses don't float well. On this episode of Does It Float? No, not well. What's up, 357? Good to see you, bud.
Do you need help?
Yes, he definitely needs help. He's a total wuss. Oh. I bet that motherfucker just bit the curb. Hardcore! Fuck that shit. I'm out.
Whoa!
Yeet.
Oh my lord!
There you go. Rednecks on every continent. Absolutely. Hold it down, brother. You got it. You got it. Good girl. Woo. Parallel park.
That is not happening right now.
Tina in a wheelchair.
All right, America. We got to get a grip on this, man. Like, I don't know what it's going to take to prevent this thing from ever happening again. But I would like to take steps today to prevent this from ever being a thing again. Oh my. That's what I call a mobility scooter. Is that a Riz steer? She going cruising? Go pick her up some honeys?
Okay, the lioness is going in the water once again.
Graceful as a gazelle.
If she makes
Look
it
at him
to
there.
to the pool.
Yep, right off the edge. I guarantee you, right before that man went off into the water, his last thought was, damn, don't drive in the water. Splash. And it was him thinking, don't do it, that his brain said, okay, I'll do it. Yeah. I would like to call a moment of silence for that man's unborn children and his future boyfriends. It was too heighty. He was too lengthy. Yeah, here we go. Send it. That man screamed yeet right before he drove in there. Yeet, 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 yeet. Yeah. Better be glad that board broke instead of your back.
Anyways.
Skeet. Oh my God. I just did not see that coming. Honestly. Are you pocket dialing? Apparently, I have a phone call.
I'm with UPS. I'm with UPS. I was gonna go with your neighbors. We go around every place.
Oh,
Make sure
great. My phone's
they're
not
home.
charging anymore. That's fantabulous.
Whatever.
What's up, bud?
I'm an auditor for UPS. Swear to God, even if it's look it up. Look it up. Michael Hansen. Okay, sorry. I'm not.
How's practice going, Jeff?
Good.
Skunk Ape says, "Hey everyone, how y'all doing?"
Yeah.
Wow. Family. Oh my God. I want to vote that guy for president. Right next to the gas. Oh, no. All right. So for those of you who don't know, geese are a whole other thing. Like their level of aggression is unmetered by the hand of man. Peace was never an option. Your best bet is to hope they don't notice you.
Oh! No. Oh, but Philip, you better.
Oh my God. I miss my tongue.
Oh, well, I wonder if he still remembers how to tie his shoes. Oh, that's genius. My man just smashed a fender. Okay, this is going to be great. Yeah. This is a great idea. Excellent. Gravity works. Gravity works. Ooh. Uh-oh. Oh!
You all right?
Well, that's methed up.
No one's in the car at all.
That's real. Wait,
I just
what?
lost the tailgate.
Wait, what the fuck? What the hell just happened? All right. Let's pay attention to what just took place. There was nobody in the car, and somehow homie lost the did the car? No, the car is in no way. Oh, there's a he's towing him.
No one's in the car at all. I just lost the tailgate.
That's one of those. She'll ride.
Careful, it's slippery.
Zip.
Oh, Matt. Hold on to the rock. Hold on to the rock.
Excellent try there, dude. I mean, it's not a bicycle. You can't just bunny hop it.
Yeah.
Lawsuit.
Woo! You all right, buddy?
No, that man is not all right. He broke both his legs. Ooh. Savage. Yeah, that's what he bailed out of that one. Ooh. Yeah, was it good, bro? Yep. Fishies.
I know I shouldn't be this close, but
Then what are you doing this close? Bro. Hold up. No, that was several layers of unsafety there. Did you see that ocean nightmare that was taking place? It was straight up spraying hot water on the
I know I
mains.
shouldn't be this close.
This is why women live longer than men. Well, not this one. I mean, bye. And rumor has it she's still in the bottom of the wash bucket down there. Oh. Huh. Yeah, there you go. Send it. I love it. God, I love it when things go too fast. Oh, that was pretty cool. That was an unfortunate bailout, though. He nailed the landing. I got to give him a 10 on the landing, man.
He's gonna go for it. Oh, he's gonna go for it. He did it. He did it. Oh yeah.
Oh, 4 flat tires.
Did you get that?
Sure did.
Did you get that?
I sure as hell did.
Back up some more. Not as a running start where I was. Back up some more.
Oh. You know? Are you all right? Oh.
I like it when they splash. Yep. Ooh. Oh, that's unfortunate. That is just absolutely unfortunate. That's just too bad. This is a common problem when you're trying to take down a large structure like that. That man in a little slot. There you go. Be a good sport about it. Ooh! Top, put a top on it. 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 Brilliant. Nope. What the hell? What the fuck was he doing up there? There's a bunch of water up there. You're done. Yeah, there you go. In case he, little kitty wants him a little nibble.
Yeah, I forgot about this little spot because I sat here waiting on the train to go by. Yeah, we need to pull over. Pull over. Yeah.
Of course, on the beach. And now your drone is gone. Pay me another $400. This isn't good.
You all right?
Nice. Yeet. Yeet. Yeet.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
She just forgot her alphabet. Ooh, she also forgot her alphabet. Oh my God. These poor bastards. Oh no. Somebody get her before she drowns, please. There you go.
Bro, are you good?
True prime A beef. All right, so I got you within 10 minutes of 2 hours. How are we doing? We doing good? Still here? Yeah. Cool. Hey, boo boo. Are we sure we don't want to mess with the house of mouse? Did y'all know that there's a small fleet of VW Beetles at the South Pole that are frozen in? Back in like the mid 60s, they were looking for a vehicle to take to the South Pole in order to use it for like scientific type stuff down there. And in the process of looking for vehicles to do it, it was discovered that an air-cooled VW Beetle is just as reliable as just about anything else down there. I think you have to have freeze plugs or glow plugs or something down there, but I don't know. Yeah, no, those slingshot rides. I like it when the guys involved pass out and the chicks are like, okay, that's a really cool place to be. I'm going to do my nails when I get home. You know, those chicks.
In the freezing alien environments of Antarctica, humans have been driven to develop some of the
That's way too long to get into right now because it is pretty in depth. 7 minutes and 17 seconds. We can do that.
Southern Arizona is known.
So this chick has taken let's get this actually done right. So this chick bought this parcel of property a while back, like 15 years ago. And she has been doing everything she can to what she calls regenerate the land. And it's this swath of absolute desert in the middle of Arizona. And she did this thing.
For its desert climate with very hot summers and mild winters. This climate has meant the region has been a hub for agricultural growth for thousands of years, despite the fact rainfall has always been relatively low. It's Arizona's rivers and aquifers that hold groundwater, which have supported the state's now $23 billion agriculture industry. In total, farmland makes up about 35% of the state of Arizona. It's estimated that these farms use nearly 3/4 of the available water supply to irrigate their crops. The Colorado River system, which supplies 36% of Arizona's total water use, has experienced extensive drought conditions for the past 19 years. This year, an intensifying drought and declining reservoir levels across the western United States has prompted the first ever water supply cuts to Arizona's farmers. Extensive droughts and dwindling water supplies have wreaked havoc on the once prosperous farms that could endure the arid conditions. However, Arizona has been turning this around. In this video, we will show you how a low-cost innovative water retention system is being used in the desert, turning the dry landscape into a fertile carbon sink, stretching over 100,000 acres, turning the desert back into a farmland oasis. So stick with us as we dive into today's video. The western United States is now experiencing a megadrought that's generated the 2 driest decades in the region. According to this research paper, scientists analyzed droughts in the southwestern United States.
Has anybody done the math on how much rain dropped by Hillary fell in the desert? Did any of it make it to the Great Basin? I wonder.
States dating back to the year 800 and found that conditions during this century are more severe than the megadroughts in the late 1500s. The first Spaniards who visited the Sonoran Desert region in the late 1600s noticed that people were growing cotton. This meant the ancestral people managed to persist, growing the thirsty crop despite the droughts in the prior centuries. They were able to do this by digging hundreds of miles of irrigation canals to bring water from the rivers to the fields, which is no different from the modern cotton farms of Arizona today. However, the ancestral Sonoran people grew cotton very differently compared to today's methods. Cotton fields were interspersed between milpa fields of corn, squash, and beans, which were conditioning the soil. This is because the milpa is a holistic system whereby each plant complements the other and the
I
environment.
want to point out here that a lot of people don't take into account when they think of the 3 sisters method. 300 years ago, we didn't have 9-foot tall corn. We didn't have a seed pod on beans that could weigh 2 ounces. It wasn't no, 25, 30-pound pumpkins. These weren't things, right?
Environment around it. The beans give nitrogen to the soil, the corn provides a stick for the beans to grow upon, and the leaves from the squash provide ground cover protection, keeping the soil moist for longer. This diversification of crop fields allowed for the ancestral Sonoran people to thrive in the desert. This is in stark contrast to the monocultures of cotton farms and vast cattle ranches that are seen in the region today. Arizona is still one of the largest cotton producing areas in the United States and is fast becoming unprofitable for farmers due to the recent 33% hikes in water rates. The ongoing costs of seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, and maintenance for large machinery also comes at a price. These industrial farming practices continue to have detrimental effects on the environment, biodiversity, and the watershed. Mining for copper and silver in the 20th century has also taken its toll on the landscape. At that time, people cut down trees to get wood, to shore up tunnels, and for the process of smelting. When the tree cover went, that's when the grasses came in, and the introduction of domesticated animals and poorly managed cattle ranching has also further exacerbated the widespread land degradation. It is this continued poor management of the land that one woman decided she had to change. Vala Clark Austin, originally from New York City, who initially knew nothing about rural life, transformed an almost barren landscape into a lush oasis. Over 30 years, Vala and her husband Josiah Austin have spent time and resources restoring the watershed in the Sonoran Desert region. They have restored over 5,000 acres of grassland, and their work has protected approximately 130,000 acres in Mexico, as well as restoring hundreds of thousands of acres of land in Arizona. They did this by creating well over 40,000 rock retention structures on hillsides and along washes. Dr. Norman's research shows that rock dams have increased water retention by 28%, which goes against conventional beliefs that bare rock transports more water downstream. The rock dams also reduce the flow of flash floods by 50%, and they extend the time of summer-based flow of streams by 3 to 4 weeks. The rock dams also help store 200 tons of soil per year, helping vegetation in the surrounding area to grow, which in turn also helps to store and hold water for longer. This has helped to reduce and control erosion significantly and increase biodiversity, creating a carbon sink of 250 metric tons per hectare, which is...
So here's where the actual linchpin comes in. You can do all of the remedial designs you want on the landscape to retain your soil and all of that cool stuff. If you don't get trees to grow, you're pissing up a rope. It is inevitably going to fail. Once you do get trees to grow, if you have any amount of water flow, introduce a couple of beavers, you'll lose a few trees, but you'll pick up a lake. Because they are experts at this crap, and you are an amateur.
Is comparable to coastal wetlands. The Austin's restoration efforts began in 1981 with a 40-mile stretch. They expanded their operation, creating a foundation called Cuenca Los Ojos, which translates to Watershed of the Springs. The foundation encompassed various educators, scientists, ranchers, and government agencies in both Arizona and across the border, which has helped to restore habitats and protect endangered species, such as the preservation of many rare native fish. Cattle ranching still takes place on Vala and Josiah Austin's land, but is done in a much more sustainable way. Vala said in an interview that some of our ranchers have cattle, some don't. I do believe there are some places it is better not to have cattle. Sometimes it's just too dry. In some cases, grasses respond well to grazing every other year. Every grass has its different personality, so you manage your ranch according to the personality of the grasses. The Austins started building rock dams intuitively, but over time they learned that it was actually an ancient practice. They discovered rock dams had been used as a dampener to plant corn behind them at Casa Grandes, an important archaeological site for the ancestral Sonoran people. And up until a few decades ago, the rock dams were still being built regularly and used on Mexican ranches, but they were no longer being installed because the young people had moved to the cities to find work. Vala Clark Austin responded by working with the local government to help pay young people to build rock dams in Mexico. Building rock dams takes a lot of manual labor. However, Vala said, I'm an old lady with no training, and if I can make a difference, anybody can do it. Anybody with a good will can go out and do something.
There you go. Good old-fashioned palate cleanser after some Ed Gein madness and a whole bunch of people injuring themselves. I find it's always good to clear the tubes, as it were. Right? God knows what's in them rocks. Well, I mean, as I understand it, you can go volunteer to do stuff like that. It's hard labor in the hot sun. But it's ultimately for a good purpose. I firmly believe if you could take a serious approach to swaling a lot of these places where we have flash floods, you could mitigate 90% of the flash flood through swales and berms, because each time the flood takes place, more water is left behind and more vegetation grows. And the next time a flood comes through, everything is more solid and can take the brunt of the flood. Plus, more water is stored because you've done more every time. It just takes effort, takes work. Somebody told me once that you could bring a seed and plant a river in the right spots in the Southwest. And I didn't used to believe the man. But looking at some of the regenerative farming techniques that have been put to use in the past few years, I don't know. It seems like it might be possible. If you could get enough shade on the ground in enough places, you might be able to turn this whole desertification thing around, right? Imagine the American Southwest being a verdant landscape of flowing rivers. Wouldn't that be cool? I don't know. Maybe it can be done. Maybe it can't. It's not exactly a mega project, though, is it? All right. So I'm going to go eat me some pizza. It's been real cool. I appreciate y'all coming by. Y'all have a lovely evening. Don't let the man get you down. Sasquatch out.
3, 2, 1.
Excuse me. Pretty Mr. Gizmo, huh, kids?